Alright, in this video we'll see how to create a CRUD operation with MongoDB, Express and nodejs. Now you see this is the form. If I type something, the name and the email, and if I click on save, I'll just open console and show you how the data is sent. So now if I click on save, you'll see the request is sent and this is the data that we have received. So the request is sent, you can see name and email we have sent it, and we have received from the server as data saved, and that got displayed over here. And also you see the details that we have added is also showing up on this table. If I add one more name, and I'll show you, just close this. Click on save. A request is sent, and you see on page load, you see these are the requests that got fetched. So this is on page load request, and this is submission request. To check the input that we have shared, the name and email we have sent to the server through form, and we have the data that we received is message saved. So these are the steps that we would be following to create this particular application. We'll just use create and read operation for now, and we'll leave the update and delete for the next part. Now we will be creating everything from scratch. You see, this is how I have managed the folder structure. I'll explain you how to create this kind of professional folder structure when creating the project. So first thing, let me just create a new folder, and I'll name it as we can name it anything. I'll just make it as user, or I have already named it user, so you can name it as student dv. So open this, and now you will see a blank. It's better to open in this way. Open project, open folder, and click on desktop. We have named it as student dv. Now something got opened. File, open folder, then student dv, and click on select folder. Now you will find a blank folder. If I press Ctrl and backtick, you will see the terminal open up. Usually terminal opens at the bottom, but I have arranged it in such a way so that I can see on the sidebar. So first thing, we need to add npm. So npm init, it will install a package.json file, and these are some default values it is asking, and your package.json is ready. Now the second thing is I need to install packages. So for that, what I will do is I'll type npm install. I need mongoose for MongoDB, and then I need express, then I need a nodemon, then I need .env. So these four packages I need for now. So once it got downloaded, you'll see the package.json would get populated with some code, and that is called as dependencies. So in the dependency, these are the packages that got installed along with your node modules. Cool. The next thing is, in the package.json you will find the entry point of this application. So it's suggesting to keep this name as index.html, but I'll make it as server.js. So let's create a entry point, server.js. So this is the file that we would be adding or creating a server. So to create a server, we need to import a module called express. So let's import and store it as an instance. So this is an instance and we need package, and this package is called express. Now with this instance we need to create another instance called app, and we need to call the method. Now with this app instance we can simply create server with the help of this listen function. The first parameter is for the port and the second parameter is the callback function. What should happen when your server runs? I simply want to display console message on the server on the command line saying that server is running. Now to run this file we need to write a code node server dot js, and it says there is a typo. Rerun this. It says your server is running. So I want to display the data, or the I want to test through the browser. So in that case I'll be creating a basic route app.get. The first parameter is the URL, and the second parameter is the callback function that can send a request and response when someone hits the home page. So here, so this is considered as home page. So if I click enter, you should let's just send response dot send hello from hello, let's just say hello world. Now to make the changes or to reflect to check the changes on this application, you have to kill this server, control C, and then restart it again. So now if I hit the home page, you'll see the text hello world. Now what if I want to change the text to something else, let's say hello world 2. In this case, to see the changes on the browser, I need to kill the server again and type node server dot js, and if to see the changes, I think this, yeah, now it's running. See the changes hello world 2. What if you need one more changes? In that case you need to kill the server and restart it again. So here you will find one more package, and that package is called nodejs. So what you have to do is you have to create a script. So why do we need to add a script? So you see the command text. So if I type npm run test, you will see the code. It's test, not text. You will see the code, which is this one, error no test specified. You see this? So that means if I type npm run, whatever command is there, it would simply display, it will execute this text. Likewise, what we need is if I type script, or if I type dev, what should happen is it should simply node server dot js. This is what we have previously done. So if I type npm run dev, it would simply convert it to node server dot js. I don't need this. Instead what I need is I need to make it nodemon dot js. So what nodemon does is, so if I type npm run dev, or first let me clear this screen and type npm run dev, and on each save if I press Ctrl S, you should see npm run dev. On each Ctrl S, you see, if I make this 4 and press Ctrl S, the server got killed and restarted again, and if I make a refresh on the browser, you should see the changes. So the reason for using nodemon is you don't have to kill the server after each time you change the application code. So that's the primary use of having nodemon. Now let's create a .env file, .environment file, and make use of .env package. So I'm setting the port as 3000 and calling this port on this particular entry point. So how will I do that? So process dot env dot whatever the variable name you have given. So this isn't just enough. We need to install, we need to call the package which is dot env, and let's just create an instance, and this instance has to be configured. So conf we need to call the config with this instance, and that would enable. So you will see the server.js, which is the entry point, is filled with random codes, random commands. Instead, what we have to do is we have to make sure we are organizing it. So the way is, first of all, we'll initialize it. The second thing is we will add the config related code, and we will have connection related code, and then we will have, after connection, we need middleware, then we need routes, then we need server. So server, we have already defined it over here. We have set up the basic routes, and these are configuration related codes. So this is how it should be organized in the server.js. Now you should see the port is running because it is able to properly get the port value from .env file and access it over here. We will use .env file to save important credentials. Let's say we will be using MongoDB URL in this file. So let's wait for that. So before that, let me just show you how to load your HTML file when someone asks for this URL. So let's create all the files should be, all the HTML, CSS and JS files should be inside a folder called public folder, and inside public folder we need index.html, and to connect index.html with style sheet we will use style.css, and then we will add script.js. So let me create a basic code and link our style sheet and link our script tag. Now over here, when someone search for this URL, I want to send the HTML. To send the HTML, we'll be using send file function, and we cannot directly call index.html, it won't work. Instead, we need to add one more package called path, and let's create an instance of path, and path has a function called join. We need to get the location of our nodejs application, then we need to say where the HTML is there. It's in the public folder, and we need to specify which file we need from the public folder, index.html. So this is enough. If I hit, or let me type something, h1 hello from HTML. So control S, click hit, and now this data is actually coming from public folder index.html. Now if I make body and make the color as a red and make a refresh, you won't see the changes because the response that we have received is just the HTML file, and HTML file comes along with its CSS and JS, that is not linked. So now we need to create a middleware. This middleware will say that whenever a response is looking for HTML file, let it load all the CSS JS file from a public folder itself. So when there is a request of index.html, always load its related CSS and JS file from the public folder itself. So for that we need to create a middleware. Whenever we create middleware, we need to use app.use. So whenever you see app.use, it's for the middleware. And now we need to use the same code, but we don't have to specify the file, HTML file. Also, this isn't a middle. We need to use one more thing, which is express.static. This is the actual middleware, and over here we have to pass this. Now if I make a refresh, you'll see the CSS got linked to our response, which is index.html, and it works fine. To check this, we can simply give hello as an alert and refresh it. You'll find the script also got included because of this middleware. Now you have a solid understanding of how to add your HTML as a response. Now let's create the database connection. Now usually it would be inside a folder called config. Inside config, make sure it's outside, it should not be inside public folder. And let's create config. Inside config we need a dv.js. Over here, since we need connection to the mongoose, we'll be using a package called mongoose. It's an instance, and we'll use require mongoose. Now this, whenever I call this dv.js, it should have a function, and that function will trigger the connection. So let the function be connect dv. As said, whenever I'll be calling this function, I want to connect dv. So it should be let's make this as try and catch, because connecting a dv is a asynchronous function. Console.log.message. It's an asynchronous function. Now what we need to do is we need to call the instance and pass connect, and then inside we need to pass the URL. Where will I get the URL? And I'll be getting the URL if I click on let's create a new dv, and we'll call it as student dv, and the collection is students, and click on create dv, and click on this, and create choose the option called so here I think this is the place where you need to look for the option called connect via. Now if I click on it and click on this driver and choose the legacy string, you need to copy this. Let me pick it from the previous file. So the thing that you have to add is the username and the database password. Along with that, we need to pass the dv also. We have named it as, so this file is very crucial. You should not show your password to anyone, and I'm showing it because once the video gets completed, once I finish this video, what I'll do is I'll simply change the password. So we would be calling this URL or the variable on this function, and we'll call it as process.env. And that's it, and it's an asynchronous function, so await is needed. And once everything goes well, we need to say console.log and dv connected as a message. if it's connected. That's it. Now we have to pass this. Let me remove all the unnecessary part. We need to since it's a single file, we have created a function. We need to export this function so that we can access it from the other files. So let's export module dot exports. Now we need to call that file. We have saved inside config. Inside config we have dv.js, and this is the function that we need, and this is the place where we can call the function. And it says there is some error, cannot find module. I think there is a typo over here. It says what? So it's a small typo, you see, it's comma instead of dot, and now it says dv connector. That means your dv is also got connected. And the next step is we need to say on this collection, which is students, what are all the data that has to be stored. So for that, to create schema, we need to create a function called model, and I think there's a typo again. It's model, not mod. Inside model we need to create one more file. We'll call it as students.js. Student, you can give it as student model.js. Now we need to create schema. Again, to create schema we need mongoose, mongoose. So this is the instance. We need to import a package called mongoose. Now with this we can create student schema, and with the instance we need to pass an object. Make sure the S is look the S is capital here. It's an object. This is the first property. I need let the type be string, and is it required? Yes, it's required, so true. So this is the bare minimum that we need. If you need one more field, you just have to copy this one more time, and we'll name it as email. Now we need to attach this schema to the model. So mongoose dot model, we need to pass the collection. We have named the collection on the mongodb.com, which is student, and what schema it should follow, the schema that we have created over here. And make sure whenever you create a separate file, you should export it. So module dot exports. So this is how we create schema. This is how we connect our database. Now what we need. So let me. Now what we need. Let's create the HTML. Let me just copy the HTML and CSS and focus on routes. So let's pick the HTML. I'll be just copying the HTML, but I'll be creating JS from scratch. Let's pick CSS also. And when I get into localhost, you see the basic HTML. Now what I need. let's work on routes. So why do we need routes? So let's say your application is huge and there are many modules. Let's say you want to save a database, you want to save department details, you want to save user details, and you want to save employee details. So each module has should have its own routes and own model and own controller. Now I'll show you how do we create routes. So here let's create routes as a top level folder, not inside. And what routes we need? We need user routes .js. Now since it's routes is defined on router is defined in Express, so we need Express package const express equal to require express, and with this instance we can initialize routes const router. Express has a function called router. Notice R is capital and it's a function. Now with this router function, let's say if someone is asking for get and the URL is slash, and now we would have a request and response as an arrow. It's an arrow function, a request. So whenever someone search for localhost colon 3000 slash user, what should they get? Send. So response dot send hello from user router. Now as said, whenever we create a separate file, we need to export module dot exports router, because we would be using this router in this server.js, which is the entry point. So route, to initialize routes in the server.js, it's again a middleware. So we need to use app.use. Whenever someone search for user, what who would be responsible to handle it? It's the user route. So let's create, or let's initialize it first, user routes user. So actually it's routes then we have, actually it's router, we can name it as routes. Actually routes is the right name, router is not the right name. Routes slash user routes, and we need to call the instance or the function that we have defined. So that the function is actually router. So here you see router is the function that I have returned. If I call this, I'll get the router function. So this simply, when I search for user in the URL, it should simply say hello from the user route. So this isn't again the right way. What usually happens is, first the request is sent to user routes, then user routes sends the data to the controller. Controller fetch or talks to the database and fetch the value and send it again to the router. So this is how the flow. First router, then router sends to controller. Controller ask the model, and from the model the data is sent to controller, and the controller then sends to the user routes. That's how the flow is. Now say I'm talking about controller. Let's create a controller now. So we can name it as user controller .js. So here exports dot we can give any name, get users or get students. It's a function, so we can simply call this function over here. Now as we have already done this, we need to import we need to import controller here, controller slash user controller. Now we can use this. User controller has one function which is get students, that is responsible for sending the response. Now it's make sure you are properly calling it. Since we are in the user routes, then we need to go one level up, and over there is controller. Now we can simply change this to hello from user controller. If I make a refresh, you will see the data is coming from user controller. So this is how the flow should be. Now this should call model, so we can simply copy this and call model over here, and we can call it as user, simply user, and we need to call it from the model, then user model. So this will talk to the database. Now let's send value through form. There is some problem, make sure you are spelling it right. Model, and then we have student model, not user model. Yes, we have HTML. Let's focus on JavaScript now. In the public folder, in the script.js. Now what we need, first thing, when I click on submit, I want these data to send to the server. So for that, let's call form with document.query selector form, and then we have email. I'll just show you the HTML so you don't have any confusion. So we have class name, class email, and then we will be displaying the result in ID, and then we have a table. That's it. Let's call the class name. So this is for the input field name, and this is for the input field email, and we have a class email. Now whenever form is submitted, a submit event would get triggered, and by default the page would get loaded. I don't want on submit the page should load, so e.prevent default is a function that prevents the page from getting reloaded. Now we need to create a object called form data, and we need to pass the name which is coming from the input name, and then email that will be coming from again input, and to send the value we need to set the endpoint. So the endpoint we would be saving. So when we talk about CRUD, which is create, read, update and delete, for create the method is responsible is post, for read the method is responsible for is get, for update the method is responsible is put or patch, and for delete the method is delete. So this is how we identify the routes. Now in the routes, let's create one another method which is post. Whenever someone submits post request to the user's endpoint, so let's define the endpoint also. Whenever it's script.js, why did it has here, we don't need this. So now let's define the endpoint. Let the endpoint be this /user. whenever someone submits post request, who is responsible? So in the user routes, whenever someone sends post request, the function that is responsible is create student. Now let's define the function also over here. And let's say data received. Now to send the input field value through the form, we need to have a middleware, and that middleware is called express.json. I think there seems to be a typo error. Cool. Now I'll just show you how to send first. To send, we'll be using a function called fetch, and the first parameter it accepts is endpoint, and the second parameter it accepts is what kind of method it is. I will be sending the method called post, and what type of data that you would be sending. So I would be sending the content type. What content type it is? It is application slash JSON. And what data you would be sending? I would be sending the form data through body. So we can use JSON dot stringify. Why stringify? I'll just say it in a moment. Now this is in the JSON. This is in the JavaScript object. Now the server, to send data from your application to server, it has to be converted into string. So to convert this into string, the JavaScript object into string, we'll be using JSON.stringify. So when I say string, string is the other word for JSON. And it says app.use requires a middleware. I think I have passed it as a string. Actually it should be this way. Now coming back to the script.js, we are sending the value. Let's see whether we are able to send it or not. Type something, click on send. We are able to send. So you see, we are sending name and email, and in return we are receiving data received. So what, in the user controller, if I want to retrieve the data, we can retrieve it with the help of request.body.name. And let's say instead of data received, what data? Name data. Let's try one more time. Type anything, name, email, and if I click on save, data is sent. I got a 500 error. It says data is not able to read, because whenever I click save, the data is sent through post, and the data is getting sent through post. And how it would be sent? It would be sent through the URL. Now again we need one more middleware, and that middleware is called URL encoded, and it accepts extended colon true. We should pass it as object. Now you would be able to retrieve the send form values from the response. So sorry, from the request. Cannot read property of name, and it should come below. That's the reason we're not able to fetch the name, email. Click on save. See, we are now able to receive the values from the controller through the request. Now what we need to save it into the server. So that's to save it into the database, we would be using a try catch block. So again, this try catch would accept an object. So let's create an object, const form data. We would be having name, request dot body dot name, and then we would have email, so this is an object. When again it's an asynchronous function, so we will be typing async. Then we need to have it inside try catch block. So whenever there is a connection between, whenever there is a code related to connection with database, try catch is required. Console.log error.message to check if the connection is connected or it got failed. Now to save this into the database, we need to create instance, new user, new student of the model, new, or this is actually, this should be actually student. It should be capital S. We can have this way, and we are creating a instance, and we should pass the object over here. It would accept the object, and in the next line we should save this. We should call the save function, and we should make this as an await. If everything got saved, then we need to send the response dot send, and message saved successfully. Also it can be JSON, because we have passed, this is a JavaScript object, and we want this converted into JSON, actual string, so that we can send it through server to the browser, and server and browser can access it, and once it's access it, need to again parse it so that the JSON gets converted back to object. So for that we'll be using then response. We will be getting response, and again we need to convert the response into response.json, and now after it got converted from JSON into JavaScript object, now we can access it. Then again we can access the data, and how are we going to display it? We have a div with id result, and we can change the inner HTML result div dot inner text, whatever data that we receive. So it's a JSON that we have passed. If everything goes well, we should see the data saved message, data sent, and it says saved successfully. Now we are not able to access it. Let's see what it is. The data is getting saved. The only thing is I forgot to add the word return. Let's try one more time with the different field. Click on save, and it says saved successfully. Cool. Now it's time to fetch the value from the database and display it. So what I'll do is I'll run a function called display students, and let's define the function. What it should do, it should simply ask the controller. So fetch endpoint, and what the controller should do, so the router will send it to the get students, and here get students, it should talk to the model dot find, and it should return it into the variable. It's called students what, all students, you can make it all students. It should be asynchronous, or else you will get an empty object. And now we need to send it as a response dot send, not send is for text. If you want to send object, so you need to make this as JSON. Now we can access this in the first we have to convert it, a response, we have to convert it first to JavaScript object, return res.json, and then once it got converted to JavaScript object, then we can access it. So now this is not going to be a single value, it's going to be a multiple value. So for that to handle, we'll send them to for each. Now let's just check. We should have two values. One is Vishal, the other one is UI monk, and we will send it to for each. So datas dot for each. Now we will have access to one by one value. Let's just try console log and pass data. If everything goes well, we should get. Also, let's just place this on page load also. On page load, you see you got these data, and you are displaying it over here, so that works. Now we are able to access individual objects. Now after accessing it, let's create an HTML. So display in HTML, let's pass this as data. Now let's define this function. Now we have access to this data, and we will simply call the table t body, and this is t body div. And now with this t body, what we will do is we will append it and use a backtick and place the HTML. So here, this is what I want to recreate it. Just copy this. This whole section has to be in loop. That's why I'm calling this and pasting it over here. And since this is an object, we can access its property, which is name, which you can see it over here. We can access ID, we can access name, we can access email. Name, email, underscore underscore v underscore ID. So I need simply name, and for here I need email. If I refresh it, you should see the fetch should get fetched assigned to constant variable display HTML. So it's simple, we cannot directly access the T body, we need to use the property dot inner HTML. Now you see the data got fetched, but on load in the I want to simply make this as blank. So if I make on refresh, you'll see only the data which is there on the database getting fetched and displaying getting displayed. So aaron@gmail.com, click on save. You see Aaron got saved and the form is not getting resetted. So we can simply call form.reset, which will ron@gmail.com. Click on save. You see Ron got saved. I hope the scope of this video is done. Thank you so much for listening.